Well, good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
And it's a smiling day, is it not?
Absolutely.
Sure. I mean, if you brought your skateboard or your snowboard, we'd have a lot of fun. So anyway, we're in for a treat as always. Today our speaker is Reverend Melissa, and Reverend Jay is their assistant today. Whew, I'm going home. And of course our music man is Ed over there, and our song leader today is sitting there. I hope you're sitting there. Anyway, Reverend Glenn Lehman, and Jack was our gong player. So enjoy.
Good morning. Spring is coming, I promise. I got to tell you, my daffodils are this high under the snow that just landed on them. So spring is coming. Our first hymn is the one that you all requested at Christmas time when you didn't like the other Prepare Ye the Way. So please remain standing for the invocation.
With all the high excitement and energy that we just brought into this chamber, remain standing, but don't remain still. From the point of light within the mind of God, let light stream forth into the minds of men. Let light descend on earth. From the point of love within the heart of God, let love stream forth into the hearts of men. May Christ return to earth. From the center where the will of God is known, let purpose guide the little wills of men, the purpose which the Master knows and serve. From the center, which we call the race of men, let the plan of love and light work out, and may it seal the door where evil dwells. Let light and love and power restore the plan on earth. May all be seated.
And saying the church creed. We're going to do this hymn after the doxology.
Okay. Reading today is from St. Matthew. No man can serve two masters, for either he will hate one and like the other, or he will honor one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and mammon, mammon meaning wealth. For this reason I say to you, do not worry for your life, what you will eat and what you will drink, nor for your body what you will wear. Behold, is not life much more important than food, and body than clothing? Observe the birds of the sky, for they do not sow, neither do they harvest, nor gather into barns. And yet your Father in heaven feeds them. Are you not much more important than they? Okay, what do we do next?
We're going to hold off on the next hymn until after the doxology and before the healing. So I'll go ahead and give the message.
Go right into the message.
Do not worry was the point. Don't worry, you've got everything you need. In the musical Godspell, a conversation with Judas and Jesus ended with Judas saying, "That's no answer to the question." And Jesus replied, "Did I promise you an answer to the question?" And that's kind of how I feel about this whole message today, because it's been weeks and evolving, and every time I started working on it, it took a different twist and a different turn. So also from the musical Godspell, which seems to feature prominently today because it just does, it's all for the best. So whatever comes, comes, and just follow me through the twists and turns, because I've gotten messages for you from music and movies and books and friends and even Bill Maher. So every time I got that little ping, it's like, oh, this would be really good to talk about. They need to know about this. And then I get another ping and another ping. So I've kind of been following the trail of the pings. But as Jay pointed out to me when we were talking about my lecture, most of it is about creation or manifestation and maintenance or nurturing and support. Even this morning when I picked up this CD to play before service, I opened it up and inside it says vibration plus visualization equals manifestation. I said, okay, I guess that's the music for today too. So anyway, a couple of weeks ago, Jeff and I were babysitting for our littlest grandson. His name was Omar, and he was getting really fussy. My solution, let's dance. So I turned on the toddler tune station, and there was music playing, and it became my new favorite song, and I started to dance, and then he just got crouched down, and he started to go like this with this funny little frown on his face. Then he started to move a little more, and soon he was not quite smiling, but at least moving, and he forgot about crying until he was tired enough that he just curled up on my lap and fell asleep. So really, this song is the message for today, so everything that comes after it is just me speaking about the message. So if you don't want to listen later, just get what you need from the song. I'll play it now. Jeff just walked back in. See, that's what happens when you leave. He came back in and put his hands on his face and says, I can't believe you really did it. Anyway, that's the lecture for today. Any questions? Bob talks, Bob talked in the very beginning, I saw you laughing when he said, you can't put a square peg in a round hole. If you do, you're doing it wrong. And Jay and I had a discussion about this because, we're spirit. And as spirit, you can do whatever you want to do. However, in this dimension, under the rules that we've agreed to play by, if you put a square peg in a round hole, you're either going to damage the hole or damage the peg or have an awful lot of space around the hole. So what was your intention? Why were you putting the peg in the hole to begin with? And he says you don't put a hole where they don't want a hole, and you don't put a hole where a hole don't belong. So the question is, again, who are you creating for? If it's not your space and it's not your creation, then no, you don't want to put a hole there because it's their creation. They don't want a hole. You create your reality. You decide where you want the holes. And he goes on to say, it's a poor workman who's blaming his tools. I really like this. It's a poor workman who's blaming his tools, so keep them in shape, you're okay. And I think about how many times it's not my fault. The thing broke. I couldn't do it because the thing broke. But did we have the right tool to do the job? And if we didn't have the right tool to do the job, did we go looking for the right tool to do the job? Or were we ready to do the job? Because usually when you're ready to do the job, you have the tools you need to work with, because that's just the way the universe works. You make a decision, like today's about manifestation, and Spirit gives you everything you need about manifestation. You get the tools when you need them. So let's look at some of the tools that we use. We use prayer as a tool. Many of us use divination as a tool. Meditation. Some of us use spells as tools. Some of us use healing modalities like Reiki and quantum touch as tools. Some of us use blessings as tools. We bless the space we're in. We bless the things that we want to work with. It's tools. Clearing a space. Knowing how to clear a space. It's a tool. So we all have tools. Knowledge is a tool. Dan Brown says, we all know Dan Brown, knowledge is a tool, and like all tools, its impact is in the hands of the user. In the correct hands, fire can provide illumination, but in the wrong hands, it can be destructive. So think about that a minute, and think about the wrong hands. We tend to, as metaphysicians, think that we don't have wrong hands, that everything has a place and a time and there's a lesson in everything. And that is true. I'm going back to a letter that I got at the beginning of the week from someone who is involved in spiritual work and metaphysics, and the tools that they were playing with. And it depends on who's using the tool, I think. Not so much whether with the knowledge. Let me see if I can get this out. The way you use the tool is the way you're taught to use the tool, and you get the right tools for the job. But it depends on whose job it is. If it's ego's job, if it's an earthbound job, or if it's thy will, if it's working with your higher self, in accordance with your higher self, and in accordance with God. Working this way instead of this way. And this person has the tools. They've been working with some very strong metaphysical tools, but because they're not centered and balanced, they're interpreting spiritual consequences in ways that you or I might. So what we might see as just a bump in the road to them is an all-out attack. So when you allow ego to use the tools, sometimes they get misused and they're destructive. So it's a matter of paying attention to how we're using the tools and which hands we let use the tools. I'm often reminded, though, that the world was created from chaos. And I know I've told you all that bunches of times, and I tell that to my employees all the time. But from a distance, there's even an order to chaos. So eventually, the challenges that you face, even if you're using tools that are a little beyond you, eventually you learn how to use the tools. And it's all about the living and the learning. And what I'm thinking about with the learning the tools is Jeff doesn't like me to use power tools. Hand tools are good. Jeff says no power tools are for me because Jeff has the directions and he figures he's got it safe. And he talks about, guys at work, why do you unplug your saw before you change the blade? And he just kind of gives them a look like, duh. But, right tools in the right hands. Is it destructive or is it not destructive? Do you know how to use the tools that you're given? And if you have the tools, Spirit's going to show you how to use them. And it's the effort, not the achievement, that's important. And when you finally get through that point of confusion and learn how to use the next set of tools that you got, there's this light, and there's no light that as brilliant as the light that comes out of darkness. Dan Brown also said knowledge is power. I mean, other people say knowledge is power too, but I'm specifically going back to the book that I was reading. Knowledge is power and wisdom is a gift from God. Right knowledge lets man perform miracles. The question to me is, who does your miracle belong to? Who decides what you believe? And then that brought me back again, thinking about the darkness and the movement and the light. There's a passage in Matthew that actually, again, came from Godspell. I watched the movie last week, and I was telling Jay this morning, I was actually reminded so much of this message today, and what Jay's going to work with later, all came from the book of Matthew. And Matthew Adam was supposed to be our son's name. He just never came. So that just kind of hit me this morning. But anyway, Matthew 6:22 says, "The lamp of the body is the eye. If your eye is sound, your whole body will be filled with light. But if your eye is bad, your whole body will be in darkness. If then the only light you have is darkness, the darkness will be doubly dark." So I guess what I'm asking you is, what is your vision? Can you see it clearly? And are you focused? What tools are you using? Do you know how to use them? Have you asked Spirit to update your toolbox? And if something's not working, are you using the tool right? Are you using the right tool for the job? You know, sometimes we're just so used to fixing things a certain way, we're used to doing things a certain way, that we always reach for the same tool. But you know, if you have a Phillips head and you're just used to using a straight screwdriver, eventually you're going to strip the head of the screwdriver and it ain't going anywhere. One of the other things that I wanted to talk to you about today was a dream that I had, and I mentioned this to Karen a while back. I had this dream. I was in the church where I grew up, and there's a huge altar, which in retrospect actually looks like a toolbox, because it's about this high and about this wide, and it's shaped like this. So it's like a big manger or a big box, or like a manger kind of, with a top on it to make it a table. And in my dream, someone had taken this altar and moved it over to the side. And I know the altar can be moved because they used to move it from time to time to a different part of the front of the church. But somebody had actually taken the altar, moved it over to the side of the church, and they were running from this side of the church to the altar, putting their hands on the altar, and doing flips off the altar over onto the organ. I got to tell you, I was deeply disturbed by this dream. Because for me, the altar and the area around the altar has always been a place that deserved the deepest respect. And if you didn't approach it with respect, then there was an issue. You know, the area just needed respect. And it's just something that's deep, deep inside of me. So the idea of somebody using this altar as a springboard or a horse kind of freaked me out. Let me put it that way. I got up kind of irritated. How dare they? How dare they? But I knew that because the dream was so vivid, I knew that there was a message there. And so I did a little bit of research about the altar, because we all know of the altar as being a place for sacrifice. But if you look a little deeper, when I looked into the Psychic Encyclopedic Dictionary and the esoteric meaning of an altar, and it says that an altar is a physical place or object used as a point of focus where one can raise or alters one's state of consciousness, gaining higher ground within oneself. Well, when I thought about that, I thought, well, gee, okay, then maybe the altar really is a springboard, and they weren't misusing the altar, even though it really bugged me. So I was wondering what in me was finding it so objectionable to use the altar as a springboard, and what Spirit was trying to tell me about this altar as a springboard. And there are some things floating around, but those are my lessons, so we won't go there. But the altar does lift you to a higher consciousness. And a sacrificial altar, even the sacrificial altar, was a way to the whole point of it was to get closer to God, to offer sacrifice to God, to get closer to God. The altar is also a place of communion. That's where we celebrate the Eucharist. It's the table where we share communion with God, where we share communion with each other. It's the table where we share ourselves, where many become one. And it's a high place. It brings us closer to heaven. But the biggest part of that is that it's a point of focus. It's a way to focus your intent. At the altar, you focus your intent. It's a place of consecration. It's a place where you take what's here and you lay it there and you say, here it is, let's work on it. And when it's the stuff that doesn't need to be worked on, it's gratitude. It's giving it back. So it's a place of consecration. It's a place to dedicate things to thy will, to dedicate this vessel to thy will, to create something. And it's a step towards awareness. It's a step towards creating a sacred space. Think about the things we put on the altar. We put our candles on the altar. We put our incense on the altar. We put our crystals on our altar. We put pictures of things that are in our heart on our altar. So these are all ways to create a sacred space and set our intention. The altar supports us. That's the maintenance piece. We have our toolbox for creation. We have our altar for maintenance, and our altar is our toolbox. We create it with tools from Spirit to support us in doing Spirit's work. In my research over the last week, and I don't remember where I heard this, but it was in something that I heard, what I heard was that the most sacred altar on earth is the soul of man. The temple and ritual are not an ends to themselves, but a means, a tool to every heart. And there's something that I did want to share, and it seems to fit right here, and it's just a tool for every heart. And when we talk about love, I read something, it was actually on a calendar, and it said that love is knowing the song of someone's heart and singing it to them when they forgot the words. And I just think that that's really important to know when you're talking about love and when you're talking about the heart and man's soul, is knowing heart song and knowing how to sing it for someone who's forgotten how. When Jay and I talked about this whole thing earlier this week and through our various emails back and forth, we got in this paradoxical mode, well, okay, so the altar is an altar, it's also a tool, it's also a toolbox. When you think about it, we are actually an altar. We are the altar. We are the tools. We are the toolbox. So this begs the question, how do we use ourselves and how do we use each other to get the job done? And at the end of the second verse of the song I played for you, Bob says, at the end of the day, together we say, together, we did it, we worked together and did our best. So, are you using the right tool for the job? Do you keep your tools in shape and use them with purpose? Is love the energy you use to power your tools? Trust the tools you've been given. Know the right one will be in your hand when you need it. And know that the whole idea of your tools and your toolbox is manifestation and vision. And the word for today is apotheosis, which means God, a man becoming God. Thank you.
Thank you.